Quiara Alegri Hudes' Water by the Spoonful is a play about broken people trying to find forgiveness. It's a critically acclaimed piece performed hundreds of times by hundreds of people, but each one of these interpretations offers new takes on the characters in this story. Masculinity and femininity are deeply tied within the portrayals of these characters, particularly with Elliot and Yaz. Elliot is frequently defined by his anger, and Yaz by her social position. Many scenes of her involve redefining where she stands in relation to others, sometimes being the one in control and sometimes feeling like she has to fight hard just to be respected. Whenever a director adapts this piece, their representation of these elements and characters differ in small ways. I'll be focusing mainly on two productions of Water by the Spoonful, those being directed by Joel Molyneux and Julian Werner, as well as incorporating small pieces from productions by Davis McCallum and Henry Godinez. Each of these direct their actors in dramatically different ways, and these differences recontextualize the actions of the characters. Elliot Ortiz is well defined by his anger, something that he often tries to bury whenever possible, only for it to rise up again during difficult moments. This anger is constantly reframed, however, in each interpretation of the character, and often reflects a different take on the type of toxic masculinity Elliot displays throughout. In Joel Molyneux's incarnation of Elliot, played by Giovanni Hernandez, our first introduction to Elliot makes him out to be impatient, loud, and easily upset by the problems around him.
This guy ain't coming. How do you know him?
We're on a committee together.
My shift starts in 15.
All right, we'll go.
5 to 4 minutes.
I'm divorced.
Yes, I don't want to hear that. That's bullshit. You don't divorce someone before you even have a fight with them.
His complaints about how late the translator is and Yaz's divorce all come across as him being overwhelmed and annoyed. Compare this to his introduction in Werner's production, played by Nick Ortiz, where Elliot's stress comes less from impatience, but rather a place of strong concern.
This guy is not showing up. How do you know him?
We're on a committee together.
My shift starts at 15.
All right, we'll go.
5 more minutes. 2 inches of pork grease fat. I'm like, Mom, you gotta recycle glass and plastic, not grease. She thinks flipping it on a paper towel after you cook it makes it healthy. Yes, I do not want to hear that shit.
Elliot doesn't protest because he's annoyed. He does it because he doesn't feel a sense of control and, as a result, lashes out with mild anger and frustration. Compare this again to David McCallum's Elliot, played by Armando Raisco.
How do you know?
We're on a committee together.
My shift starts in 15.
All right, we'll go.
No, just 5 more minutes. Well, the doc says she can't be eating all that junk. It'll mess with the chemo. You gotta talk to her. I'm trying to teach her about quinoa and broccoli rabe, healthy shit.
His impatience doesn't come from concern, frustration, or desperation, but rather a place of cockiness. Elliot here is dressed substantially differently and offers a completely relaxed disposition, with his words serving as an articulation of his problems without sounding needy or emotional. This Elliot is based around a tough guy persona, desperately trying to keep any of his fears from making him appear weaker, an act common in the men of today's society. We can also use these scenes to compare the way Yaz is portrayed by each director and actress. In Molyneux's, portrayed by Alex Loder, she seems fairly meager, constantly acting as though she needs to justify her actions with lots of sincerity, even when it isn't necessary.
2, my now legal failure. I'm divorced.
Yes, I don't want to hear that.
You've been saying that for months, and I've been keeping my mouth shut. All I need is a John Hancock. So go. He didn't fall out of love with the family, just me. Did I ever say it's possible?
By example.
But did I ever say the words?
We should also note the way she is treated by the translator upon his arrival.
Yasmin! Forgive me. You must be...
Elliot Ortiz. Nice to meet you. Appreciate it.
Professor Almond. We'll have to make this short and sweet. My lecture began. Well, talk fast.
Yes, can you give us a second?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be in the car.
We can see she's given very little regard, and she is moved into the background much quicker than in other versions. Werner's Yaz, played by Gianna Yanelli, is given a much more confident persona. She says her words with a manner of fact and distinction, but doesn't come across as smug or rude.
Gonna be my witness?
What?
My now legal failure. I'm divorced.
Yes, I do not want to hear that shit.
You've been saying that for months now, and I have been keeping my mouth closed. I just need a John Hancock. So go. He didn't fall out of love with the family, just me.
I haven't even seen you two argue.
We did. We just had smiles on our faces.
No, that's bullshit.
Her interaction with the translator also has her highly involved, as opposed to the swift removal seen in Loader's Yaz.
Those words.
Forgive me. You must be...
Elliot Ortiz, man. Nice to meet you.
Professor Amen. My lecture begins in about... began. Was up fast.
Yes, give us a second.
I'll be in the car.
The biggest departure for this character, however, comes from McCallum's version, played by Sabrina Yevada. This Yaz is in high authority and gives little regard to the plights of Elliot due to an acknowledgement that many of his complaints come from a place of overconfidence. Try and hold on to what your first impressions of her are.
Guy ain't coming. How do you know?
We're on a committee together?
My shift starts in 15.
All right, we'll go.
No, just... Tonight on the way home, we gotta stop by Whole Foods.
Sure, I need toothpaste.
Oh, Yaz, you gotta help me with my mom.
You said she had a good morning.
You gotta talk to her. I'm trying.
Right away, we can see that her disinterest and dry sarcasm give her a sense of control and superiority, although this changes when the conversation shifts onto Mama Yinny, demonstrating how much this Yaz cares about that character. However, you might have had an instinctual reaction to her clip that made you think of her as rude, bossy, or impatient. Although these traits are swiftly disregarded by the end of the scene, their presence demonstrates the double standard held between men and women in regards to demonstrating anger. Douglas Frost writes about this in his book, Differences Between Men and Women in Everyday Experiences of Anger, where he says, "Women are not entitled to anger. Anger, except in some girlish tantrum, is unfeminine, direct, bold, eyeball to eyeball, confronting, dominating, resisting, insisting anger has been traditionally forbidden to women." That isn't to say this character stays the same throughout the entire runtime, as we do see Molyneux's Yaz come forward and take control more during her lecture. Here, she speaks with more authority, and clearly feels confident in her position of power.
A B diminished chord is still resolving to C major. A tritone is still resolving up to the major sixth. Diminished chords, tritones, still didn't have the right to be their own independent thought. In 1965, something changed.
Through having her change her dynamic like this, we see that her character isn't weak or submissive, but instead much more emotionally comfortable with her family and loved ones. Werner's interpretation of this scene has Yaneli's Yaz interacting with her students, waiting for replies and trying to make the lecture feel like an open discussion.
A B diminished chord is still resolving to class. A C major. A tritone is still resolving to major sixth.
This Yaz already commands respect by her family and keeps the same level of emotional openness between both them and her class. To take another look at Elliot, we can see his use of anger in a much more direct and toxic way during the scene at Odessa's apartment. This moment is important to the character of Elliot, and it demonstrates how far his anger is taking him, acting out on innocent people he has no reason to hate. This moment is important to the character of Elliot, as it demonstrates how far his anger is taking him, causing him to act out on innocent people he has no reason to hate. Each performance reaches this conclusion, but the way they do so is different each time. In his production of the play, Henry Godinez has his Elliot, played by Edgar Sanchez, framed as a childish act of pure malice. It deconstructs a character that we have seen as a man through every other performance, and instead reduces him to a boy, bullying others to make up for how powerless they are.
What does crack feel like?
What? Elliot, cut it out.
Sometimes I'm amazed I don't know firsthand.
Who is this?
How does it make your brain feel? Are you just a smoker, or do you inject it right into your eyeballs?
Meanwhile, Werner's approach to Elliot's violence comes as a natural escalation from something that wasn't intended to be violent. The conversation between him and Orangutan starts calmly and with small talk, before the idea of someone actually liking his mother takes control over him and he begins lashing out.
Shit, it posted.
Haiku Mom! Hit me up with those 17 syllables, baby! Haiku Mom? What the hell is that?
It's her username. She's got the whole world thinking she's some Chinese prophet.
Bunch!
Are you just a smoker, or do you inject it straight into your eyeballs?
Who the fuck is this?
Haiku Mom!
Bullshit! You didn't censor me! You think Yimmy would want you acting this way?
I think Mommy Yinny would want Mommy Odessa to pay for one single flower in a fucking field.
This is not Haiku Mom, this is her son.
Despite the different approaches, both of these instances highlight the fragility of Elliot's emotional state, and how being forced to adopt qualities of peace and forgiveness, typically feminine traits, cause him fear and anger. Water by the Spoonful is a beautifully constructed story about people falling apart. Two of its central characters, Elliot and Yaz, each serve as examples of people restricted by the social norms expected of them and their gender. Elliot's demand for emotional composure and a macho attitude is present in every interpretation, but through small changes, the directors and actors are able to change where these demands come from. In a different vein, Yaz is represented as a figure with little respect or control, expected to maintain composure the entire time so as not to hurt her role as a motherly figure. Both of these characters are assigned into boxes they may never be able to break out of, and the way that each of these performances brought them to life is truly incredible to watch.